You ain't taking me anything.
We'd like to welcome you to BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. Hassan Giordano, June 29th, 2013. So much has happened since we've last talked. What have you been working on?
What we haven't been working on, we've been doing some joint things with BeMoreNews.com, looking at these elections. Obviously, the 24th was 1 year out from the June 24th primary elections next year. A lot going on. We have a lot of announcements. Marilyn Mosby announced to run for state's attorney against Greg Bernstein. Now, the attorney Nevelin, can't think of the brother's name right now, but he's supposed to be jumping in that race as well. We have a few revelations in terms of what's going on. 35 shootings in the city of Baltimore in 1 week's time. Somebody very close to me, a niece of my comrade, died in those shootings just the other day. So we're dealing with that, the homicides that are going on in the city and the rash of violence. We're dealing with the Supreme Court decisions that were just handed down, the African American community being marginalized across this country here and as well in the city of Baltimore. And the new minority, and I'm saying, is Latinos and gays. So it's a lot going on. There's a lot that needs to be addressed, Donnie, and I'm just thankful for DMV Daily and Be More News to be alternative news sources for of and by the people.
Mm-hmm. That 45th district, you were pretty keyed in on that as of some of your latest articles. How's that Senate race coming over there? How's McFadden versus Julius Henson? How's that looking?
Well, it hasn't really taken shape yet. I know Senator McFadden has already filed his intentions to run for re-election, despite rumors that his opponent Julius put out that he was retiring. I don't know where he got that from, but the senator tells me specifically that I am not going anywhere, but this may be his last run. This may be his last term. I'm not saying definitively, but I'm almost certain that he may hand the reins over after the next 4 years. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's no real polling that's came out of there yet, but I think that Julius still has an opportunity. Let's not forget Mr. Henson has run a lot of races. He knows how to run elections, but if anybody, Senator Nathaniel McFadden being is probably the most senior African-American legislator in the state of Maryland, so it's going to be really hard to beat him, because you can best believe Mike Miller and the rest of them will make sure that he has the adequate amount of funding to take on any competitor.
So let me ask you, are we satisfied with the caliber of work that our black elected officials are doing representing the city of Baltimore?
I think overall as a collective, probably not, especially when you look at the HBCU funding and the lack thereof. When you look at a lot of things that are going on, I wouldn't say specifically with Senator McFadden. I don't know. I don't live in the 45th. I know my Senator, Joan Carter Conway, is lacking in her service. I know some of my delegates are lacking in their service. As a political reporter, I see Baltimore City is consistently being given the cold shoulder by those in Annapolis. They had to pretty much beg for school funding, which is...
You mentioned Mike Miller and how he would continue to support Senator McFadden, but yet you also lay out a bit of evidence or some notions that would suggest that there's time for change.
Oh, it's absolutely time for change. We definitely need, see, I don't believe in term limits, because I think that at some point you do need senior leadership in places like Annapolis and Congress in order to get things done. However, I do believe that we do need fresh blood at a period of time. I can't specify the time, but when people become lax, like Joan Carter Conway, when people become lax and become so worried about the chairmanships and the positions of whips and other things that they could care less about the people, then it's time for a change. And so I'm not going to name names, but obviously you pretty much know who they are. The people know who they are. They are no longer addressing the constituency. They're more worried about the leadership in Annapolis and what that means for them, as opposed to what that means for their constituency.
We've had, along those lines, 2 community meetings thus far, one in Woodlawn, one in West Baltimore, and quite often I'm hearing people say that we send these elected officials to Annapolis to represent the community, but they get to Annapolis and end up following suit with maybe the Democratic machine or just entities outside of the black community which had nothing to do with them getting elected.
Well, we saw that last year with Question K, which moved the local elections, the Baltimore City elections, to the presidential elections. The people wanted it to be moved with the gubernatorial And we saw the senators and the delegates, but specifically the
So
senators.
they're complicit in a lot of this.
They are, but they came back to the constituency after the session was over and acted like they didn't want to move it to the to the presidential. When the people started being outraged by this, they specifically said in meetings, especially Joan Carter Conway and the 43rd delegation, said, "Well, we really didn't want to do it, but we had to do it," and that was the biggest lie you could ever have told. You're the ones who moved it, and that's why it got onto the ballot for the people to vote on. There was no education behind it. People didn't know that they were voting to move it to the presidential.
Kind of like Question P. Kind of like Question P.
Absolutely.
Decimated, did harm to the black community. We lost representation.
Well, not to mention, they moved the primaries to June. It's the middle of the summer. People are away on vacation. They're not paying attention. It's hot outside. They're at the pools. They're at the beaches. Who's going to really show up next year? I'm anticipating less than 20% turnout in the primaries of Baltimore City.
It looks tight because you really have from now until December, and then the session will be going on from January, mid-January to mid-April, which leaves you, 2.5 months of a bunch of television commercial bombardment, and that's it.
Yeah, people are used to that. Most people know that the general election is in November. They know that they go vote for the president in November. People get used to these patterns. We're used to September. The Democrats chose to move it back so they wouldn't have to fight and contend ill-funded against a Republican challenger this time around. They knew that they would have a very contentious primary, as we see with Anthony Brown, Doug Gansel, and others. So they knew that they had to move it back in order for them, whoever won the primary, to be able to build up their war chest for November. The problem is there's no education. The Board of Elections has yet to let people know. If it wasn't for Be More News and other local places like DMVDaily.com, people wouldn't even know that it was June 24th, the primary. They would still think it's in September. We need to do a better job of educating the constituents, not only in Baltimore, but the state of Maryland, that their primaries have moved.
Okay, two final questions. How's this gubernatorial race looking?
It really hasn't played out. I think Anthony Brown has shown way too much of his hand, in my humble opinion. He's introduced himself as a candidate. Within a month period of time, he introduced his running mate as the candidate without ever really introducing himself all the way to the voters across the state. Then he brought out this long list of endorsees, the people who are endorsing him across the state. I would have rolled that out location by location. Instead, he did the entire state, which looks good on paper, but what's next? It's like you played all your cards. And in Texas Hold'em, in any poker game, you want to know that you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Doug Gansler is sticking to his game plan. He'll probably make an announcement in September. He's staying on course and not letting the Brown campaign take him off. But there's other, you got Missouri that's going to get in the race. That can throw off Doug Gansler coming out of Montgomery County. There's so many variables and possibilities between now and June 24th. It'll be interesting to see, but I think and anticipate that a lot of money will be spent on that race as well as the Attorney General's race.
And the critical areas will be Montgomery County?
Montgomery County, Baltimore City, and Prince George's County. A little bit of Baltimore County and Arundel County, too.
Okay, now here's the final one. Delegate Aisha Braveboy, Delegate Frank Conaway Jr., Black Legislator of the Year. Who is it?
That's a tough. I would have to give it to Frank Conway Jr. I mean, Frank Conway was the only Baltimore legislator to vote against the gas tax. That is a very regressive tax that'll be hit on the people. Now, Aisha did the same thing. Aisha pushed for HBCUs, but at the end of the day,
you give him Frank Conaway Jr. I'll go with Aisha Braveboy. That way, it's a running tie.
That's fine, but I would give it to both of them. Honestly, I mean, it's hard to take away something from anybody who is really, providing the leadership that we need in elected officials. And both of those individuals that you named are leaders that need to be there. Unfortunately, Aisha said her time in the General Assembly is up. She wants to run for Attorney General. And unfortunately, our black elected officials, like Jack Young and others, have already given their endorsement to a guy from Montgomery County, Brian Frost. Great guy, but you don't know him. What does he get? What does the people of Baltimore get for your endorsement of this guy 18 months out when we have a black candidate?
Who endorsed him?
Half the Baltimore City and half the black legislature, more than half.
Well, I don't understand how John Carden didn't get their support.
Well, and that's
isn't the Carden family pretty prominent in statewide elections?
He is, and that
most
name
prominent
Carden,
Jewish political family.
Right. Will definitely be served well for him, and so who knows how it's going to shake out.
What kind of leadership is that, Frosh?
Brian Frosh, and it's like, okay,
did he promise something?
Baltimore?
Did he promise something?
Who knows? We don't know why these people gave their endorsements.
Do we have a list of things we need them to sign?
We do.
10 agenda items: health, economic development, business, crime and justice, you know.
Well, I would challenge the people, and I would challenge entities like Be More News and DMV Daily to come up with that, because we need that, especially when it comes to HBC funding and other things. We have to use this role in the gubernatorial and the attorney general's race to make sure that our interests are served no matter who gets elected. It's not about personalities, it's about the principle of politics, and that's where people get thrown off. They get too caught up in the personalities and not dealing with the principles of the fact.
Well, we thank you for this interview. I don't think those famous television shows you go on, I don't think they have this stuff here. I think we've beat their content right
Got
here.
them hands down, Donnie.
The one and only Hassan Giordano, DMVDaily.com. Keep watching BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth.